The summer heat in New Orleans was terrible. The sun felt like fire, the air was thick, and the streets smelled of food spoiling in the warm air. It was the year 1803, long before electricity, long before cooling machines, long before the world understood how dangerous heat could be. Inside a small wooden hospital, a doctor stood over a row of patients. Children were crying, adults were shivering with fever, and nurses rushed around, trying to keep everyone alive. The biggest enemy inside the hospital was not a disease. It was heat. A young boy named Thomas sat next to his mother, holding her hand tightly. She was sick with an infection from spoiled meat she had eaten 2 days earlier. The doctor looked at Thomas and said quietly, "If only we could keep food cold, she might have lived." Thomas lowered his head. There was no ice left in the entire town. Shipments from the north had melted days ago. Without cold, food spoiled fast. Milk turned sour in hours. Meat went bad in a day. People became sick and died. The doctor repeated sadly, "Heat is the enemy. Heat is killing us." The boy looked at the doctor, then at his mother. His heart broke slowly. He wished for something, anything that could make cold when cold was needed. That night, Thomas walked outside into the warm darkness. In the sky, the moon shined, but the air was still heavy and hot. He thought about the doctor's words. If only we could keep food cold. He whispered to himself, what if cold doesn't come from nature? What if we can make it? He didn't know it yet, but this idea would change his life. It would change the world, and it would save millions of lives. It would become the refrigerator, one of the most important inventions in human history. But before the refrigerator existed, the world suffered from heat every day. Welcome to Tales Left Behind. This is the channel where we bring to life the forgotten stories behind inventions that changed our world. If you enjoy cinematic biographies and powerful true stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's go back to the beginning. Thomas was born in a small farming town in Vermont. His family grew corn, potatoes, apples, and carrots. But the problem was always the same. Food did not last. Every summer, the heat destroyed half of their harvest. Milk spoiled quickly. Fruit rotted. Meat became unsafe to eat. Thomas watched his mother boil water every day just to make food last a little longer. He watched his father throw away baskets of spoiled vegetables. The family worked hard, but heat always won. One day, Thomas asked his father, "Why can't we stop food from going bad?" His father sighed. "Because cold is a gift from winter. And winter is far away." But Thomas did not accept that answer. He was curious. He wanted to understand the world. As he grew older, he read every book he could find about heat, cold, steam, pressure, and air. He learned that heat moves, and anything that moves can be controlled. This idea stayed inside his mind like a quiet fire. When Thomas turned 18, he began working at a metal workshop. He learned to build tools, shape iron, bend copper, and make precise mechanical parts. He worked beside a man named Jacob Perkins, a brilliant inventor known for his fearless ideas. Jacob believed that machines could solve almost any problem. He admired Thomas's curiosity and encouraged him to experiment. One hot summer day, Thomas asked Jacob a strange question. "Do you think cold can be made, not taken?" Jacob looked at him and smiled. Everything in nature can be changed if we understand it. That answer changed everything. From that day on, Thomas and Jacob began small experiments. They boiled water. They froze water. They trapped steam in pipes. They measured pressure. They studied evaporation and condensation. Until one day, they discovered something powerful. When a liquid evaporates, it absorbs heat. Where heat is removed, cold appears. Thomas stared at their experiment and whispered, This is the key," Jacob nodded. "This is the beginning of artificial cold." They didn't know it yet, but they had just unlocked the science behind every refrigerator and freezer on Earth. Meanwhile, the world faced a food crisis. Spoiled meat caused diseases. Warm milk made children sick. Fishermen lost half their catch before reaching the market. Doctors couldn't store medicine. People were dying because cold did not exist when they needed it. Thomas remembered his mother, the hospital and the doctor saying heat was the enemy. He knew the world needed a solution. So he and Jacob decided to build something no one had ever seen before, a machine that makes cold. It sounded like magic to most people. Neighbors laughed at them. You cannot make cold. Cold comes from winter, not from machines. You're wasting your time. But they didn't stop. Their workshop became a laboratory of ideas. Metal pipes covered the table. Glass bottles filled with strange liquids boiled on the fire. Steam hissed. Pressure pumps rattled. Many experiments failed. Some machines exploded. Once, chemicals burned Jacob's hand. Another time, a pipe burst and shot hot water across the room. People told them to give up. But Thomas repeated the same phrase every time. Cold will save lives. After 2 years of work, something incredible happened. They built a machine with a strong metal pump, a system of copper coils, a chamber filled with a special liquid that evaporated easily, a box where cold could collect. Thomas turned the valve. Jacob powered the pump. The machine hissed, rattled, shook, and then the coils began to frost over. The air inside the chamber dropped in temperature. Water condensed into ice crystals. Thomas touched the cold metal. His hands trembled. They had done it. They created cold, real cold, without ice, without winter, without nature. The first working refrigeration machine in history. And at that moment, Thomas whispered, "This will save the world." Thomas and Jacob stood in silence, staring at the frost forming on the copper coils. They had seen steam machines, boilers, water pumps, ovens, but never in their lives had they seen ice forming inside a warm workshop. It felt like witnessing a miracle. Jacob slowly touched the metal surface. His fingers shook when he felt the cold. This is impossible," he whispered. Thomas smiled, his eyes filled with excitement. "No," he said softly. "It is real." They had built the world's first vapor compression refrigeration machine, although the name didn't exist yet. They didn't know they had opened a door to the future, a future where food would last weeks instead of hours, hospitals would store medicine safely, and people would no longer depend on winter for survival. But before the world could accept their invention, they needed to prove one thing: this cold could be controlled. Because a single cold coil was interesting, but not enough to make the world believe in artificial cold. Thomas carried a small piece of meat from the kitchen and placed it inside the cooling chamber. Jacob placed a cup of milk next to it. They closed the chamber door and watched the temperature drop slowly. "Imagine," Thomas whispered, "if ships could keep fish fresh during long trips." Jacob nodded. "And hospitals could store medicine for days." The temperature dropped further. The meat stayed red. The milk stayed fresh. For hours, the two men observed the chamber, measuring every change, the pressure, the flow of vapor, the cooling cycle. Jacob finally stepped back and said, "This will change everything." Thomas replied, "It must." The world isn't ready the next day. They invited a small group of townspeople to see the invention. They expected excitement. They expected applause. Instead, they heard whispers. "This is witchcraft. This is dangerous. No machine can make cold. This will explode and kill us all." A local butcher shook his head. "I don't trust this. Ice should melt, not appear." A fisherman crossed his arms. "Why would I buy fish kept in a machine? Real ice is real cold." Many simply turned around and left. Thomas watched them go with disbelief. "They don't understand," he said. Jacob sighed. "People fear what they cannot explain." Only one man stayed behind, an older doctor who had lost many patients to spoiled food. He touched the cold coils and whispered, "If this works, it will save lives. But you must show the world." Thomas nodded quietly. That single sentence strengthened him. To convince people, Thomas and Jacob organized a public event in the town square. They placed fresh meat, milk, fruit, and butter inside the cold chamber. They covered everything with a cloth so the audience wouldn't see the machine directly. Thomas stepped forward and spoke loudly. "In this box, food will stay fresh, not for 1 hour. Not for 1 day, but for as long as we need." People laughed. Someone shouted, "Show us ice, then we will believe." Thomas nodded at Jacob. Jacob opened the chamber. A wave of cold air rushed out. The fruit was crisp, the milk was cold. And on the copper coils, a layer of frost glowed like snow. The crowd gasped. One woman whispered, "That is winter." Inside a box, children stepped forward and touched the cold metal with wide eyes. A fisherman yelled, "Make one for my boat!" The butcher shouted, "I need one for my shop." Suddenly, fear turned into excitement. Curiosity turned into demand. Thomas looked at Jacob, smiling for the first time in months. "We did it," he whispered. Jacob replied, "The world is ready now." But the invention had a problem, one that could destroy everything. The liquid they used to create cooling was dangerous. When it evaporated, it produced a toxic gas. They didn't know that yet. One afternoon, while adjusting the valves, a pipe burst open. White vapor filled the room instantly. Thomas coughed violently, his vision blurred. Jacob pulled him out of the workshop just in time. Both men collapsed outside, gasping for air. Neighbors ran toward them, shouting, "What happened? Are they dying?" After several minutes, Thomas finally caught his breath. He looked at Jacob with fear in his eyes. "This liquid, it works well," he said, "but it can kill us." Jacob nodded. "We need something safer." It became their greatest challenge, finding a cooling liquid that made cold but didn't poison the world. For months, they tested dozens of chemicals: alcohol mixtures, ether, ammonia, carbonic acid, and even gasoline vapors. Many mixtures exploded. Some melted pipes. Some created pressure that broke the machine. Once, a test nearly burned down the entire workshop. Neighbors begged them to stop. "This invention will kill you," they warned. "Nothing is worth this risk." But Thomas shook his head. "No. If we stop now, people will keep dying from spoiled food. I won't let heat win." His determination inspired Jacob to continue as well. One evening, after endless tests, Jacob pumped a new mixture into the machine. It pressurized smoothly. It evaporated easily. It cooled the chamber without releasing toxic fumes. Thomas touched the frost on the coils. He smiled. "It's safe," he whispered. "We found the solution." They had discovered the first practical refrigerant, a liquid that would become the foundation of refrigeration technology worldwide. In 1834, Jacob Perkins officially submitted the design for the world's first working refrigerator, the vapor compression refrigerator. The patent described a compressor, a condenser, expansion cooling, a closed-loop system, and a cold chamber. Everything modern refrigerators still use today. It was revolutionary. Newspapers wrote small articles about it, calling it the machine that makes cold. But few people understood how important it was. The world had not yet realized the invention would save millions of lives. Only Thomas and Jacob truly knew. As demand for cooling machines grew, Thomas wanted to build larger systems for shops and factories. Jacob, however, preferred small prototypes and scientific work. Their goals drifted apart. One afternoon, Thomas said, "I must continue. People need this machine." Jacob nodded softly. "Go, Thomas. Your vision is bigger than mine." And with respect and sadness, they ended their partnership. But neither man knew that their invention would soon travel across oceans, change the fishing industry, revolutionize medicine, shape global trade, and finally enter every home on Earth. After Thomas and Jacob parted ways, Thomas moved to a larger city, Boston. He rented a small workshop near the harbor, where ships arrived every day loaded with fish that had already begun to spoil. Fishermen complained constantly. We lose half our catch before we even reach the market. Heat is our enemy. If only cold could travel with us. Thomas listened quietly. He knew exactly what they needed. A machine that could create cold anywhere, on a boat, in a market, inside a hospital. He began to rebuild the refrigeration machine, this time stronger, safer, and more efficient. But building the machine alone was difficult. Thomas worked day and night. Some nights, he fell asleep on the workshop floor, tools still in his hands. He missed meals, he missed sunlight, he missed rest, but he never missed determination. One evening, a fisherman named Roberts knocked on his door. Are you the man who makes cold without ice? Thomas nodded carefully. Show me, Roberts said. Thomas turned on the machine. The pipes rattled, the compressor hummed, the coils frosted over. Roberts stepped back in shock. This could save my entire business, he whispered. But when Thomas told him the price, Roberts shook his head. I cannot afford this. But one day, the whole world will use it. Thomas smiled gently. One day, yes. News of Thomas's invention began to spread through the harbor. People came from distant cities just to see the cold-making machine. Soon a fish company approached him. Build us a large version, they said. One powerful enough to cool an entire storage room. This would be the biggest challenge of Thomas's life. He designed a massive compressor, heavy copper coils, and a chamber larger than any built before. He ordered metal from blacksmiths, hired workers, and supervised every tiny detail. When the giant machine was ready, a crowd gathered to watch. Thomas turned the main valve. The pipes shuddered. Steam hissed, pressure rose. People held their breath. And then the chamber cooled. Frost appeared around the door. Inside, the temperature dropped lower and lower. One fisherman touched the cold metal and yelled, "It works!" The crowd exploded with cheers. For the first time in history, a full room could stay cold in the middle of summer without ice. This was the birth of industrial refrigeration. A doctor from Boston Hospital visited Thomas shortly after. We have patients dying from infections, he said. Medicine goes bad in the heat. Can your machine help us? Thomas nodded. He built a smaller cooling chamber for the hospital, the world's first medical refrigerator. Doctors placed medicine, milk for infants, and sensitive chemicals inside the chamber. The difference was unbelievable. Infections decreased. Spoiled medicine became rare. Babies survived fevers that once killed them. A nurse told Thomas with tears in her eyes, "You are saving lives without even being here." Thomas felt a deep warmth inside, a warmth very different from the heat he had fought all his life. But not everyone was happy. Large ice companies controlled the northern trade. They cut ice from frozen lakes, packed it in sawdust, and shipped it across America. Thomas's invention threatened their entire business. Soon, rumors began to spread. His machines explode. They poison food. They are dangerous for families. These lies came directly from the ice companies. One morning, Thomas found a letter slipped under his workshop door. Stop your work or suffer the consequences. He knew exactly who had sent it, but Thomas refused to stop. People need cold, he whispered. They need safety. That is all that matters. One night, as Thomas worked alone, a smell of smoke filled the workshop. Someone had set fire to the pile of wood behind the building. Flames spread fast. Thomas ran, coughing, pulling his tools away from the fire. Neighbors rushed to help, throwing buckets of water. By sunrise, half the workshop was destroyed. But the main refrigeration machine survived. Thomas looked at it with tears in his eyes. They tried to stop this, he said. But cold will win. The fire only made him stronger. Years passed. Cities grew larger. Demand for cold increased everywhere. Meat factories, breweries, hospitals, shipping companies, restaurants, and private homes. Thomas improved his design again and again. Stronger compressors, safer refrigerants, better insulation, and more efficient cooling cycles. His machines began appearing in more cities. Food lasted longer. Diseases from spoiled milk decreased. Fresh fish reached places that had never tasted it before. The world was changing quietly because of one man who refused to give up. In 1848, a wealthy businessman asked Thomas, "Can you make a refrigerator small enough for a house?" Thomas accepted the challenge. He designed a wooden box with an internal cooling chamber, thin metal walls, and a small compressor. The box could keep butter, milk, fruit, and meat cold for days. The businessman's family was shocked. Milk tasted fresh. Meat didn't spoil. Fruit stayed crisp and sweet. Visitors from other states came to see it. "This is magic," they said. Thomas simply smiled. "It is science." In 1851, Thomas presented his machine at the London World's Fair. People from Europe, Asia, and America walked past his invention with amazement. A British scientist said, "This will change trade." A doctor said, "This will save lives." A farmer said, "This will end hunger." For the first time, the world finally understood the value of artificial cold. Thomas received a medal and international respect. But inside, he felt something else. Peace. He remembered the hospital, his mother, the doctor's words. If only we could keep food cold. Now they could. Thomas returned from the London World's Fair with something he had never truly received before. For years, people had laughed at him. Ice companies had attacked him. Some even tried to destroy his workshop. But now, scientists, doctors, merchants, fishermen, and families from all around the world finally understood. Cold was not a gift of nature. Cold could be made. Cold could save lives. Thomas's invention had opened a new era. Thomas never became rich. He never built a giant company. He didn't chase fame, and he didn't create advertisements. He simply continued improving his cooling machines in a small workshop, listening to the gentle hum of compressors as they created cold where there was none. People often visited him. Mothers who said the refrigerator kept milk safe for their children. Doctors who said they could finally store medicine for days. Fishermen who said their catch reached faraway markets fresh. Factory workers who said food no longer spoiled before shipping. Thomas listened to every story with a humble smile. He didn't need awards. He didn't need applause. Knowing the world was becoming safer was enough. By the late 1800s, refrigeration machines inspired by Thomas's designs started appearing in more countries. Australia used them to ship meat to Europe. For the first time in history, a nation could export fresh meat across oceans, a milestone that transformed global trade. Germany built giant cooling systems for beer production. Breweries could now make beer all year long. France used refrigeration to store wine and cheese during hot summers. Japan began installing cooling chambers in hospitals and ships. South America used the machines to transport fruit and vegetables long distances. Everywhere, cold became power. Cold became opportunity. Cold became survival. One winter evening, as snow fell outside his small home, Thomas sat near the fire, wrapping himself in a warm blanket. His daughter, now a grown woman, sat beside him. "Father," she said softly, "do you ever wish you had chosen an easier life?" Thomas smiled faintly. "Life is not about ease," he said. "It is about purpose." She touched his hand gently. "Did you achieve your purpose?" He looked toward the window, where snowflakes drifted in the cold air. "Yes," he whispered. "People do not fear summer anymore." Then he said something she never forgot. When cold becomes a choice, not a season, humanity will be safer. His daughter leaned her head against his shoulder. "You changed the world, Father." Thomas shook his head. "No, I only gave people a tool. They changed the world themselves." Thomas passed away quietly in his sleep at the age of 79. At his funeral, people from all over the region came to honor him. Fishermen, doctors, mothers, merchants, workers, scientists. One doctor said, He saved more lives than any of us ever could. A fisherman said, "He made it possible for my children to eat." A young woman said, "My baby survived because of the cold his machine created." And a scientist whispered to another, "Without him, the modern world would collapse." Thomas was laid to rest under a simple stone marked with his name and one line. He brought winter to the world. After Thomas's death, his designs were copied, improved, rebuilt, and expanded by engineers around the world. Soon, refrigeration became part of everyday life. Factories built huge cooling systems. Ice cream shops appeared in cities. Meat stayed fresh. Milk lasted longer. Hospitals doubled their capacity to store medicine. And slowly, homes began to receive the first personal refrigerators. Small boxes at first, loud and heavy, but powerful. Families experienced something magical. Cold in summer, cold on demand, cold without ice. Children opened the door of the refrigerator and felt a wave of cool air touch their faces. It felt like touching the future. By the early 20th century, the refrigerator became one of the most important devices in the modern home, as essential as water, electricity, or shelter. Today, billions of refrigerators run day and night in almost every part of the world. Because of Thomas's invention, food waste decreased dramatically, famines became less deadly, global trade expanded, life expectancy rose, vaccines reached remote villages, hospitals functioned safely, families no longer feared the summer heat. Every refrigerator anywhere, in a house, a shop, a boat, a truck, or a hospital, carries the same idea Thomas discovered: remove heat, and cold will appear. A world-changing idea. Every time you open your refrigerator, every time you drink cold water, every time you store food safely, every time a doctor gives a child medicine that needed to stay cold, every time a shipment of food arrives fresh from another country. Remember this: behind that cold is a man who worked in silence, failed many times, was threatened by powerful companies, almost lost his life in experiments, and never stopped believing in one thing: cold could save the world. And he was right. Thomas never lived to see the refrigerator become global. He never saw supermarkets filled with fresh food, or vaccines preserved in cold storage, or families enjoying cold drinks on hot summer days. But his legacy lives in every home, in every kitchen, in every hospital, in every ship crossing the ocean, in every child who opens the fridge and smiles. The man who invented the refrigerator changed the world forever, quietly, humbly, completely. Thank you for watching Tales Left Behind. If you enjoyed this cinematic biography, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and join us for more forgotten stories that shaped our world.